Let's see if we can get him to magically appear. Because sometimes that happens. See?
Look at that.
Ta-da!
Hey everyone, how's it going?
Hi, how are you doing?
Good. I like that very suspenseful Syncfusion trailer. I was waiting for, because I've worked with like all the amazing different control vendors out there, and they always make like super amazing videos. They're like, check out this chart and this graph. I was waiting for it, but I think you did a very elegant job of describing Syncfusion.
That's actually credit goes to Jimmy. Because the sponsors that we did not have a video for, Jimmy made a very nifty,
I want one
short to the point video.
Can I get one, Jimmy? Can I get one that says my name?
Absolutely.
Definitely. And there's this effect as well.
I want that to play when I enter every meeting on Teams.
Oh, yes.
James has arrived. That'd be pretty good.
I like this.
But I've heard that you used to sing in the beginning of the meetings.
I sing quite often, all throughout meetings. I worked for I worked for a game studio early on that was very toxic and bad. There was one person there that would sing throughout the day and would do little like rhymes and jingles about like everyone, and really uplifted everyone's spirit. So I kind of brought that in to just always in my life, always singing all the time, and I enjoy, like, especially when the first on the meeting. And then let's say like Maddie or Katie on my team or Jamie joins or Fritz or something. I like, just something about their background or something. These little jingles, just like, I'm here with Jimmy and everyone at Dotnet Frontend Days. It's just really like a smile on everybody's face. And
someone please clip that. That needs to go viral.
I encourage everybody to introduce singing in all of your team meetings. That would be a great thing to do, especially if you're a manager. Like, you can really, I don't know. I think it's fun. So
I like it.
Yeah. The meeting would be super short if I sing, because everyone would just disconnect.
No. You would use vocoders.
Ooh,
they would disconnect if I sing.
I would use vocoders.
I can use what now?
Huh.
Jimmy has a slight thing for everything with vocoders. Then voice box and
everything is better with a vocoder.
Okay.
I don't make the rules. I just know them all.
Well, I'm super excited. I know the day has been going fantastic, and I'm super appreciative that y'all are putting on this event. I think that, I come from a client background, so I'm always excited about anything front end. But I'm glad that I'm talking about web development as someone that is not a web developer. So that's what I'm excited for. So I don't know how I signed myself up for this session. I'm doing it all the time. I've been so deep into hybrid development now for no good reason. I have no business doing web development, and you'll see from my presentation.
Do you have a screen to share as well?
Yes, I do. And I recently moved to a single monitor. I'm very excited about it.
Oh.
It is an ultra wide, but it is a 1920 by 1080 because I'm a pro. But don't worry.
Yeah, look at that.
Let me know. I'm just going to minimize you, so I won't be able to see anything. So just whisper quietly in my ears. And since I only have one monitor, now I can't see anything besides this beautiful slide. So you have to let me know if it's up and running. I have no idea what's happening right now.
We can see them.
It looks up and running.
All right, so take it away, James.
Awesome. Yeah, so since I can't see anything in this magical part of having a single monitor, which I think is awesome and also not awesome at the same time, I have more desk space back, and it's like more freeing, and it makes me feel happier in life. But then also presenting is also terrible. So I'm James Montemagno. I'm a principal lead PM for our developer community over at Microsoft. You've heard from many of my friends at Microsoft and outside of Microsoft today. Some of them may have talked about .NET MAUI. Some may have talked about Blazor. Some may have talked about Blazor Hybrid and .NET MAUI together. But I'm going to dedicate this entire session on how you can go go hybrid if you're a web developer today across mobile and desktop. And additionally, if you're a native app developer, how you can blend some web content with Blazor into your applications. And this is really exciting. I'm not a web developer, like I said, but I do like to mess around with HTML and Razor and CSS from time to time and pretend like I know what I'm doing. And the beautiful part, I believe, of these technologies, of everything in .NET, is the ability to share code and knowledge between them all. So maybe you're a XAML developer today, or C# code behind developer, or a Blazor developer today, or just an ASP.NET developer using MVC. you can easily share that knowledge and learn something new to mix and match front-end client development technologies together. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. And that really is the story, right? Is this unified development experience that .NET has really been the dream of for developers, no matter what you want to develop for. And with .NET 6, it brings everything together even closer with common base libraries, APIs, and runtimes. And of course, there's a vast ecosystem, amazing tooling, no matter where you want to develop. I'm specifically going to focus in on web, desktop, and mobile. And you can see there's a bunch of different technologies that enable you to reach these platforms. But the best part of .NET is that you can combine these things together, and the things that the teams are working on are simply magical. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. Now, first, let's talk about Blazor. Blazor, we've already had sessions on from many people here today, but give you a quick recap in case you're watching this and just tuning in or watching this later on. Blazor is .NET's full stack web app platform for .NET. And it's part of ASP.NET Core, which means that if you have an ASP.NET Core website, of course, you can add in, Razor pages, MVC. You can blend Blazor into it. You can add Angular, React. You can do all the things in ASP.NET Core. Just go to the .NET website, dot.net, and that has Razor pages, MVC, and Blazor all shoved into one magical box of goodness. Now, Blazor traditionally, though, for just web development, has had two modes. It's had Blazor Server, where all of your code runs on the server. But the magical part about Blazor is that you don't have to write JavaScript if you don't want to. You just write C# code, and basically that executes on the server, and the DOM is updated via Signal R for the Blazor server component. And this means your .NET Razor components and Razor class libraries can be shared across different Blazor applications, which is really cool. So if you're in a situation where you are concerned about performance, you're doing crazy number crunching, you can leverage the power of servers and never have to write JavaScript. You can still write it if you want to. It's up to you. It's your life. You got to from time to time. But the cool part about Blazor is that actually there's a WebAssembly version of it that enables you to run all of your C# code directly in the browser. So kind of think of it like how iOS and Android apps can be built with .NET, right? You're running iOS and Android apps, and you're running .NET inside of it, right? So just like that, you can now run .NET code and C# code directly inside of the browser via WebAssembly, which is an open standard, which works across all of the major browsers on desktop and mobile as well. So it's not a Microsoft technology. It's a standard that not only C# and .NET, but other languages are part of too. Of course, with WebAssembly, right there, you're sort of in this sandbox because everything's running offline, disconnected inside of here. And of course, it's the user's computer and the processing power that would limit the performance of your application. But there's two different use cases, and based on what you want to build is really going to enable you to build awesome web apps. Now, I'm a client app developer. I've been building iOS and Android, Mac and Windows applications for over a decade with C# because I absolutely love it. And for those developers, our next evolution of that platform for developers is .NET MAUI, the multi-platform app UI framework. Now, there's already been talks about .NET MAUI, but in case you don't know, this is the next evolution for .NET developers to build cross-platform native user interfaces, all from C# or XAML to target Windows, Mac, iOS, and Android, and of course, tablets and anywhere that iOS or iPadOS run. It's been super streamlined to be super cross-platform, which means you have a single project and a single code base and single resources like icons, fonts, and images that are all optimized per platform. You can deploy to multiple devices via mobile and desktop. And of course, you can share your .NET code with all of the other platforms that you may be wanting to reach with .NET. And everything compiles up into a native application at the end of the day. Now, these are two awesome pieces of technologies, right? You have Blazor, you have someone ringing my doorbell here, but you also have .NET MAUI. Now, the cool part about this is what if you could actually build cross-platform native apps with Blazor, right? Because I just told you, you have to build web apps with Blazor and native apps with .NET MAUI. But what if you could build them with Blazor? And what if you could actually leverage all of your existing Razor class libraries that you've already been building for your Blazor applications and use them inside of those native apps? And what also if you had access to 100% of the native device capabilities and native performance of those devices? And what if you could run that on Mac, Windows, iOS, and Android, and on the web as too? That's basically nearly every single device out there. And you can with Blazor Hybrid. Now, what is Blazor Hybrid? Well, Blazor Hybrid is an extension of Blazor. You can think of it as the third option that you can go with if you need to reach more platforms. And it sits between Blazor Server and Blazor WebAssembly. Like, you could take a Blazor WebAssembly app and you could bundle it into a progressive web app. That's totally cool too. But you're going to run into limitations as far as the packaging, the deployment, and accessing those native capabilities, or even accessing native user interface. So Blazor Hybrid sits in between Blazor Server and Blazor WebAssembly. It takes advantage of best of both worlds. You get the advantage that you have a fully disconnected application that can run without any signal R or anything like that. So it's very similar to WebAssembly, where the Blazor application and .NET code is going to run inside the native host. But you get to take advantage of not only the full machine's power and capabilities of iOS, Android, Mac, and Windows, but you also get the full .NET runtime that's available there. So they're not sandboxed at all. You have everything available to you that's a native in performance and ahead of time compiled. It's built directly on .NET 6 and .NET MAUI. And what this means is that it offers up a Blazor Web View control that hosts and renders Blazor Web UI. The cool part is that you can also mix and match native capability bits of UI and your Blazor UI as well. So what this means, and we'll get into the code here, is that when you start to build or create your very first Blazor Hybrid application with .NET MAUI and Blazor, is you get a new component that is a Blazor Web View. And what this does is it gives you the ability to take any Razor page and render it natively. So here I'm saying my component type is main, and that main is main.razor, and it's some HTML and some code, some Razor, I should say, in HTML, and some code there. So we've all seen the click counter a billion times, but you can see I'm using the @datetime.now, the @counter, and the strings that automatically Razorify it with data binding. And you get those on @clicks that automatically will call on click and increment that count and update the UI. So the best part here is that this thing is going to run 100% natively on the device in a single process. So it's not sandbox or anything like that. There's no HTTP, no network required for the Blazor components. And that's the biggest thing if you take away anything, 100% native on the device. And it's not sandboxed at all. Now, of course, if you need to make web requests because you're accessing data on the internet, you could totally do that, but you're not restricted. It's not a required functionality to run this thing. The only HTML that, only the HTML UI is rendered into the web view control, right? So you get this web view control, the HTML is there and it's rendered. So let's take a look at what this looks like over here. So if I was to bring up Visual Studio 2022 and I was to create a new project, you can see here that I have a bunch of things in the dropdown. And if I zoom in, you'll see that I have a MAUI app and a MAUI Blazor app. Now, this MAUI Blazor app is Blazor Hybrid, basically. And Blazor Hybrid, I'll talk about, is actually a larger suite of capabilities, not just for .NET MAUI, but also for WinForms and WPF. And that's the template that you'll want to create. To save a few seconds, I've created it earlier, right there. And the only thing you need of today, since it's in preview, is you're going to need Visual Studio 2022, the latest preview. And then you need to, of course, check the web and the mobile .NET and .NET MAUI components. All right. So this is a .NET MAUI application hosting a Razor and Blazor Hybrid inside of it. So here we have our MAUI app. And if you've seen other demos today, you'll have noticed that there's things over here like multi-targeting for Android, iOS, and Mac Catalyst and Windows. It's using a single project. It's using implicits. It's got cross-platform application identifiers and versions. Down over here, we have cross-platform icons, images, fonts, and splash screens all rolled up into there. If we go over into our resources folder over here, we can see these are all cross-platform everything that are optimized for each platform. Under platform folders, we have our Android, iOS, Mac, and Windows folders, sort of as the host application configuration there. If you need to access native code, you can just write it right in there. That's the same in a .NET MAUI and a .NET MAUI Blazor application. But the real difference is that we have a dub root folder with our CSS and Bootstrap and OpenIonic in there, iconic icons in there. And then we have a main Razor, a bunch of Razor pages, and some C# weather forecast stuff. And this is pretty cool because there's only a few XAML pages. So if you want to write more XAML, you can write more XAML. And if we look at that main page, it's only one thing. It's a Blazor web view. It's a component type of main. And that main is going to be the main layout of our application. So it's going to have this index, or it's going to have a bunch of routing associated with it. And that's it. The only difference here in our startup application is that what it does is it registers the Blazor web view. It adds the Blazor web view to our services, and it just adds singletons into the dependency service as we would expect. Now, if I run this application, it's going to compile a native Windows application that's hosted inside of a WinUI 3 application. And it should show up on my desktop. So it's going to compile it up and deploy it into a debug session. And sure enough, I literally have a Blazor application running inside of a native application. You can see all the different XAML hot reloady things are coming up here. If I tap around, I can click around on the counter. I can fetch data inside of my components. If I go ahead and snap this over here, let's make this a little bit smaller. We can see that the UI is also responsive. So it also minimizes down however your CSS is set up. If I come into my counter over here, I can, of course, come in and change this code to plus equals 10, for example, save it and hit the hot reload. And we should, if this updates here, now we're increasing it by 10 over here. So we get our counter update right as we would expect with the hot reload. If I come into my index Razor, we could, of course, do the Blazor-y type things that we would expect. So I could come in and add a counter in here component, hit save on there, and that will hot reload. And if I come into my home, sure enough, I have a counter component right there. So all of that stuff that we know and love is all available to us inside of our application. And this is totally a Blazor application because if I hit F12, we can see that our dev tools come up right here. It's running on a 000 port. And of course, you can disable this for release because you wouldn't want to do that. But here's our Blazor web View.js here. We have our console, we have our network, we have all the stuff that's happening inside of here as we would expect in our tools that are happening there. Now, this is running on Windows, so it's using a web view too, but on Android and iOS, it's going to use the native web views that are there, and Mac, of course, too. So one thing that we can do, though, is we can change around this application. So for example, if I come into this main page, we can see it's just a content page, and it just has a single Blazor web view. If I wanted to, I could come in and say, put in a new namespace, and we'll say pages, and we'll say pages over here. So we get our access to our counter, fetch data, and index. And let's change this to a tabbed page, for example. I'm going to update our code behind to be not a content page, but a tabbed page. And now what we'll do is we'll create a few content pages here. So let's go ahead and just do this. So now we'll have 3 tabs over here. So 1, 2, 3. And instead of local main, let's do pages index, pages counter, and pages fetch data. So now we have 3 tabs that we're creating over here inside of our application. So instead of using that host that had the tabs all like that, we're going to use native tabs on the different platforms because now we're going to be rendering those tabs with .NET MAUI. So now you can actually see, well, there's tabs in here, but you can't see them because we need to give them a name. So let's do that. So let's first come up and shrink this down a little bit. Perfect. And then we can say, all right, well, this first page is going to be title of home, for example. And it says home up here, but it's in black. So let's go ahead and just make this maybe white, for example. We got hot reload happening there, and our XAML and our C# and our Razor, all the things. Let's do a title of counter. It just updates right here. And then, of course, we can come down over here, say title, and let's do data or whatever, right? And then data comes up. And sure enough, we have our weather right there. So now we're just using native tabs in our application 100%, and we're totally good to go, which is really rad. So I'm hosting those Razor pages inside of there, and it's super awesome. There's other things we can do, though, too. So, for example, since we're inside of a native application, what we're able to do is maybe let's add another button here that says, instead of click me, let's do check internet. Okay, and we'll do a check. Oops, yeah, check internet. Check internet. Internet. There we go. Let's create another method here that just checks the internet. Now you're thinking like, well, I'm a web developer. There's probably got to be some like JavaScript plugin to do something, all this stuff. No. .NET MAUI has you covered with .NET MAUI Essentials, which gives you over 70 different native APIs cross-platform in your application. So what I can do is I can come into here and I can say var has internet. I'll say connectivity right here, which is part of the API. If I was to type in maui.essentials or Microsoft.maui.essentials, we have all of these native APIs available to us. So accelerometer, app actions, battery, connectivity, device info, they're all available. So I can just say connectivity dot network access. And if it has internet, that's good. And I'll say var type, and we'll say connectivity dot profiles I don't know, first or default, and then we'll just do like unknown. I guess if it doesn't have any, should be on there. And then let's go ahead and do an output. Let's do a little pop-up when I click on that. So I'm going to do a Maui app 4.app. We're going to access the native app container, and we're going to access our main page. And I'm going to say display alert. I'm going to say internet, and then we'll do some string interpolation, and we'll say has internet. It has internet there of type. So we'll say okay, and then we will close it off. All right. So now, ideally, if this thing reloads, I might have changed the state too much. Let's double check to see if it's going to hot reload for me. Else we'll reboot it here. Let's go ahead and restart it. I might have changed too much of the hot reload state. But we've added another button. We're going to check the internet and just access some native APIs. Let's snap this over here. Check internet. And sure enough, I totally have internet on Ethernet, totally working, rad. So access native APIs, native UI inside with our Blazor web views there, which is really cool. Now, the best part here is that this is a MAUI application. So I can go to my drop down and I can decide to go to iOS, Mac, or Android. On Mac, you got to be on Mac, but iOS, I could plug in my Windows device and I could go ahead and deploy there. Let's just go ahead and deploy this on Android over here. I'm just going to start without debugging so I can disconnect it and get it up and running. But what this is going to do is run and compile our native Android application, but bundle in all of our Blazor bits and pieces and all the code that I just wrote for accessing the internet information over there. So let's go ahead and see now. We have our counter, our home page, our tabs over here, which are all here. So I can do click, 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 click. I could, of course, add some padding here, probably would be ideal. I can check the internet. Sure enough, I have cellular internet here on this device. If I put it into airplane mode, check internet again, no internet, false, unknown, because it doesn't have anything. And sure enough, if I go ahead and toggle that back over, give it a second to reconnect, we have cellular internet right back again. That's the first one in the list. Of course, it would probably list Wi-Fi as well. So I have all that capability all now blended in. Now, these are tabs on top. You could also put tabs on the bottom. You can decide how you want to do that, but we're getting the native, look and feel here of the native tabs running on Android compared to running on Windows like your users would expect, which are really cool. And since it is a native app, you do have controls to those native components. So like I said, you can fully stylize these. You can put them on the bottom if you want to, based on your application type that you're looking to align with. But here I've just taken the Blazor, Razor components that you know and love and shoved them into native application that's running right here on my Android emulator, which is super cool. Now, beyond just what I showed you, kind of the getting started introductory of Blazor hybrid, there's kind of like two different modes that you can think about as a web developer or as a native client developer in which you may want to use Blazor hybrid in your applications. You could decide to build new apps that are composed 100% of Razor class libraries, and then these could be consumed and used on both the web and inside a native application. That's one scenario, is basically take your entire Blazor application, put that in a Razor class library and share it automatically with your other applications. Or you may, and like I said, you may want to just reuse the entire Blazor web app that way too. Or you can kind of modernize. Think of it as, I have an existing native application and I have some cool stuff going on in Blazor world, and I may want to merge those two different things together and kind of create these little islands, little pockets of Blazor throughout my application. You can think of it as a dial, right? You either have 0 Blazor or you have Blazor on 11, which is full Blazor 100% up in there. Or you're somewhere in the middle, or maybe at 25%, or maybe it's just one page of your application, right? But you want to be able to start sharing more code between your web teams, your client teams, or if you don't have a client team, you are the client team now as a Blazor developer. And of course, you can kind of grow, right? You can blend in more Blazor, blend in less Blazor. Kind of depends on what you're looking to do, what your users are telling you, and what your designers and yourself need in your application. And sometimes it's just faster when you're shipping key pieces of functionality on web and desktop and mobile to have one unified way of doing that. So let's look at a little demo of a little Blazor and a lot of Blazor. And let's start with a lot of Blazor, because that's what I'm all about, is sometimes putting in all the Blazor all the time. So for .NET Conf, last year, we built the .NET podcast application that runs across web, desktop, mobile, all the places, powered by powerful backend services. It has a beautiful ASP.NET Core Razor landing splash screen page. And when you tap on sign in, it takes you to a full Blazor application. This is 100% Blazor over here. This is a WebAssembly application. It has a progressive web app over here as well, taking full advantage of it. And you can see that I'm subscribed to a few podcasts over here. I can search for podcasts. There's my podcast, Merge Conflict. We'll subscribe to that. We can take a look at it. We can start listening to a podcast. We can say, we can listen to it later. It shows up in my listening queue over here. And I have different light themes and dark modes and all sorts of cool pieces of functionality there. So the first thing that we could do is take this entire application and shove it into a .NET MAUI application. So for example, if I pull that up right here, what we have is basically our .NET MAUI shell over here with very little code. It's the same exact code that I showed before, but it has just some Razor scaffolding. And then what we see is all of our different Razor pages and extensions and things down here. So here's our components. We have pages that are all being shared with our web UI over there and different services. So all of these Razor class libraries are being pulled into this .NET MAUI application. And we can see here, it's a MAUI app using Blazor Web View, using a MAUI app. It's using common patterns. The biggest difference is that it has to use these theme, local storage, clipboard interop. In this instance, since I'm reusing 100% of my Blazor application, I'm also, accessing JavaScripty things. So the music playback, for example, is through JavaScript, just the web player. So it's not natively integrated into it. But if I pull these applications up over onto my devices, we can actually see what they look like. So we can get our Android app running over here. And let me go ahead and get this one down over here. And sure enough, we have our Blazor application. We can scroll through these. We can go into our subscriptions and subscribe to something. And sure enough, we have all of the same functionality that we had inside of our Blazor app, because this is a Blazor application, right? If I shrink this down, we can see the tabs go down on the bottom. They align. They do all the stuff that we would expect over there, which is quite nice. So 100% reusing that application directly into a .NET MAUI application. Now, for me, though, I'm a big fan of native UI, native controls, and kind of blending in the capabilities when we need to. So in that instance, we actually have another version of this application, which is 100%, well, almost 100%, 90% native and a little bit Blazor. So this is our podcast application. And you can see all of our pages here are all written in XAML. We have our view models, we have services, MVVM, we have cross-platform fonts and images and strings and styles and all that good stuff that you would know and love. And if we look at the Discover page, for example, we have all of our native UI. Collection views are going to be optimized on phone, tablet, and desktop based on what you need. And the cool part of this is that if we go into the platforms folders, we'll see on Android, we actually have an audio service that's using Android Media. It's going to use proper local notifications to display audio controls. On iOS, we have the same thing, an audio service. So we're accessing those native capabilities of those players to seek time. So we're kind of breaking out of that bubble that's going on there. So we can access those native capabilities. But there's a really cool part of this website that would actually be quite a lot of work when we were developing this app to bring it over to native client development, which is this Listen Together page over here. And this is a really cool one. So what you're able to do is, let's say I'm listening to the latest .NET MAUI podcast, and I go over here and I say, Listen Together, and I'll say Blazor Web is my name. I'm going to open a room. Now, this room over here is a room where I can invite my friends to listen to this podcast, and we can kind of send emojis back and forth as we're listening to the podcast, which is quite cool. So as we're kind of listening together and one of us starts and stops, we can share that state. So this is 100% Blazor Razor UI, but it's using SignalR to open the rooms, to send back information. And in the web version, it's playing with the web audio playback. But what we've done inside of our .NET MAUI application is we have our pages and a Listen Together page. And what you'll see is that we have a Blazor web view, and this is using the Blazor Listen Together component from the same exact Blazor component library that we saw earlier that's being used inside of our Blazor application. But the difference is that it's inside of a native shell with the native player using native audio playback inside of here. So blending these two worlds together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the Windows app and the Android application. And we're going to attempt to see all of these together all on the same screen, which is always a fun thing to try to do. Let's kind of blend these together here. I'm just going to go ahead and put this here. And I'm going to go ahead and enter my code. And I'm going to say Windows is my name. You can see Windows popped up right over there, which is pretty cool. If I come into my together mode, this is our, again, everything you're seeing here is the Blazor UI. I'm going to go ahead and say Android over here, say join room. Android pops up right here. And now if I go ahead and I start listening to audio, notice that it's playing on all of them, pausing on all of them with Signal R. It's playing in my eardrums. You can't hear it, but rest assured it is. And then as we're listening, we can send emojis across the way, all via Signal R, all using the Blazor user interface and animations there. Whew, I'm listening to like 4 versions of that podcast all in my ear. That is quite complicated. But you can see the flexibility of being able to build out Blazor web applications and bring some or all of that application into native applications using .NET MAUI, which is quite spectacular in my opinion. Now, what I've shown you today is how to leverage some of that Blazor and .NET MAUI goodness together. You can use Visual Studio to develop, reuse your existing C# and .NET skills, reuse your Razor class libraries, HTML and CSS, and of course, take advantage of that rich control ecosystem, whether it's from Syncfusion, Telerik, DevExpress, the community, all these amazing things out there, you can reuse that. And you can reuse that inside of the Blazor hybrid environment. So reuse all of your existing web development skills and code, which are probably much, much better than mine. You can access all the native capabilities, like I showed you with just connectivity, but geolocation, all that goodness. You can mix and match native and web UI. It's up to you as much or as little as you want. And it's also going to help you reduce app development time if you're building for web and for client experiences as well. I mentioned earlier that both Blazor Hybrid runs on other things besides .NET MAUI. So that Blazor Web View is also available for WinForms and WPF applications running on .NET 6. So it's also important if you're looking to modernize existing WinForms and WPF applications and want to blend in some more web tech in there, you can do that with Blazor Hybrid. If I had another 15 minutes, I would show you, but I believe Dan is after me, and he's also going to show that off a little bit too. But in summary, choose what you want to do. Blazor, Razor, Hybrid, built on .NET MAUI, modernize, get it today in the latest Visual Studio previews. You can go to github.com/.NET/MAUI. And that's the podcast application as well. Demo code, screenshot that, 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's it. Thank you so much. Go build awesome things.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool.
That was a cool application.
Let me see if I can bring you all
did.
up. Oh, cool. There we go.
I did see one flaw with that application, though.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, our podcast is not on it.
I blame Dan, really. So, Dan, I told him, I said, Dan, you're in charge of all the podcasts in the feed.
Okay, so we need to talk to Dan afterwards.
I believe so, yes.
Okay, we have time for a few questions.
Cool. I try to keep it short, so I wanted to keep a little bit of time. Yep.
Is it possible to develop Blazor with SAML like Silverlight instead of HTML5 and CSS?
Yeah, it's a good question. So no, Blazor applications are all built with Razor and HTML syntax there. So, Blazor Hybrid in this model with .NET MAUI brings the web into the native client. If you're looking for, you're leveraging your existing XAML that would maybe bring to the web, that's not something that is planned at launch, or I don't have timelines if we ever plan on doing that at all. But things like Avalonia and Uno are platforms that do have a component. One's built on WPF XAML and one on WinUI 3 XAML. And those have WebAssembly options that are there. Those are not from Microsoft. Avalonia is community built, awesome project. Uno's from Inventive. Also, they're all open source, things like that. But my good friend Frank Kruger, who does the Merge Conflict podcast with me, he has an open source library called OOUI, OOUI, and that actually brought Xamarin and Form XAML to the web, and he's also bringing that to .NET MAUI. So as far as official support, no, but that was something that he did work on because he had that use case. I always think that web is a complicated space because of the types of devices, the screens, the real estate, the test metrics, the CSSification of everything under the day. So it just depends on your application, what you're building there. But as far as answering this question, the answer is no, but there are options because .NET is amazing because there's so many awesome different frameworks out there and we love them all.
Well, we sure think that
I would
is
love
amazing.
SAML for the
Yeah.
web, though.
Oh, yeah, you would. Okay, so we have another one. My Blazor app takes about 3 seconds on my phone to import a picture I take, convert the stream to a base64 string. Would using a hybrid app that uses MAUI for the image part be a solution to that?
That's a great question. It's possible. Taking your stream, converting it to base64 depends on your image, right? Is it a 5 meg image? You're still probably going to have some issues there, and you're probably going to have a spinner that's going on. You look at something like Instagram, right? Those images are super highly optimized on the back end servers. Images shouldn't be big. Your phone takes a 25 megabyte picture because our cameras on our phones are ridiculous. But you should not be rendering that inside of an application. Your devices only have so many things in memory that are there. The advantage here that you will have, Minion who's asking, is that you can access those underlying native APIs of iOS, Android, and Windows, which are going to be optimized to load those images faster at the end of the day. So based on what you're doing, if you're building like something that needs to highly process images, you can access those underlying APIs, which will always be faster than trying to do it in the web or something like that.
Great.
Look at this guy.
Are these templates available if I use .NET CLI and Visual Studio Code, asks Cecil.
Totally. Cecil, all you need to do is do .NET new .NET new -- list, and you'll see a MAUI Blazor application there. So you'll see MAUI Blazor, and then, you can just go ahead and run it up. .NET Run, do all your things. .NET MAUI applications run best in Visual Studio 2022 because of all the things that are there, but there's great documentation to run it via the CLI. The biggest thing is in your config in VS Code is to specify some additional command line parameters of, am I launching this for Android, iOS, or Mac? So there's some additional flags that you can add to your configuration. But
Awesome.
Yes. Yeah.
So Android emulators takes forever to load a MAUI application. Is this an issue specific to computer or emulator, or is it generally slow to load mobile app UI on emulators?
Both. Both. It really depends. Android. So there's a few things. There's a whole bunch of falsities of what's happening in people's minds here because we all expect things to happen instantaneously, which is totally makes sense. The first thing is Android emulators in general can run in one of 3 modes. The worst mode is not accelerated at all, which means it's super crazy slow because it's emulating all of ARM and the Android operating system itself, which is super slow. Don't do that. If you're on Mac or Windows, you have Intel Haxum. So if you have an Intel processor, that'll run virtualized accelerated, which is super fast. You saw my emulators run super fast. If you have AMD or if you need to run Hyper-V, there's the Microsoft team and Google team work together to enable Hyper-V scenarios for the default Android emulators. That's what I'm running. It's also super fast. But of course, Android emulators, they use like 2 gigs of RAM. There's a whole bunch of, you're running a whole computer in a computer, right? Unlike a simulator, which is a slimline thing, which is like what Apple has. Now that's one thing. So it could be your computer. I prefer to develop on a desktop more than anything, but not everyone can have a super desktop that is 10 years old like mine. When you build it once, it lasts for a long time. The other part though is remember when you hit run and you hit debug, things are happening. When you launch your application, there is all sorts of debugger information going back and forth, the jitting that's happening. So when you're debugging your application, it's always going to feel like that startup is slower because it's doing a bunch of stuff on startup to actually launch your application. That's just the case. When you go to release your application, you're going to be using ahead of time compilation, things that are super optimized. You're going to bundle it up and it's going to launch super fast. And the .NET MAUI team and .NET team are always trying to optimize that as well. in 10 years of development, I've never really had a problem with any of our startup time. Sometimes it has, not the best, but it's gotten a lot better. And I've never really had consumers complain about the startup time. I think me as developer, I always want it to be faster, always. But, my apps start in like under a second, on all my devices. And I run a test device as a Pixel 2 XL, and we're on Pixel 6. So if I'm happy on a Pixel 2 XL, it's great. But, there are Android devices that are, $20, and apps aren't going to run super great on it. All of them. So, I mean, you can only expect the world. But to answer the startups question here, that would be what I would say.
I think we have time for one more question.
Uh-oh.
When you're using Blazor Web View component, how do you see the CSS to handle the styling? Try the debugger to stop inside the Blazor component of the Razor component library that inside the Blazor Web View.
Yes, great question. So as far as styling goes, it's the same CSS. So the same CSS, if you did a file new Blazor app or a file new Blazor hybrid app, it's the same app. It's the same logic, same CSS. So the web view knows about its sizes and correlations. So just like you would develop a website to display properly on a tablet or a phone, you'd use that same CSS there. And as far as breakpoints go, you can add breakpoints into your code chunk there as well, and you can diagnose it. And then, of course, if you're on Windows, you can hit F12, bring up the diagnostic tools and all that stuff too, and you can see what CSS is being loaded when. So some options there.
Nice. Thank you so much.
Cool. You're welcome.
Was another great session.
I try. Thanks for having me. Super appreciate it. If anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to me or anyone from the team on Twitter. We appreciate that.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
And we have a competition.
We do. One more time.
Last time, last chance.
You can still not win, Daniel. But